Okay, so today we're going to talk about grammar, and this is going to be the first of several different grammar exercises and grammar lessons that you're going to take care of on the Moodle page. And the reason for that is the fact that in school we just simply don't have enough time to talk about grammar, and grammar is essential to your understanding of becoming a better writer, or how to become a better writer. Now, back in the day, people would sit down and teach you this stuff, and this is the way that I learned it, and I got to tell you the truth, it was boring. And so at some point in time, English teachers decided that was not the way to do this. It is nevertheless important for you to understand when we talk about editing your writing and making your writing better, there are certain things that you do, and in order to understand how to do those things, you have to understand the terminology. It's not any different than using scientific terms in science class or math terms in math class. Here we're talking about terms that we use to distinguish between things that need to be fixed in your writing and things that might need to be improved in your writing. You should in fact think about writing in terms of an analogy. When you write, you're taking basic building blocks, nouns, verbs, interjections, conjunctions. You're building a foundation, and from that foundation you create sentences, and sentences become paragraphs, and paragraphs become essays. So if you think about writing in those terms, think about the three little pigs. One little pig built his house out of sticks, and it didn't last long. And what I'm trying to do here is give you the tools to build a strong, solid house, to build a strong body of work when you write. And in order to do that, again, you have to understand the terminology. So we're going to talk about phrases today. Now, you're already familiar with, or should be familiar with, 8 parts of speech. The 8 fundamental parts of speech that make up the English language are listed here. The noun, the verb, the adjective, prepositions. Those 8 parts of speech, when combined with each other, are how we form phrases, clauses, and sentences. And when we talk about a phrase, we're just talking about a group of related words, words that somehow have something in common with each other. Generally, the commonality is that they're trying to tell you something that they think is important. So a phrase is just a group of words that does not have a subject or predicate, and that's what distinguishes a phrase from a clause. A clause will have either a subject or a predicate, and a phrase has neither. Now, the subject in a sentence is generally a noun or a pronoun, but it's also all the words that modify, explain, or identify that noun or pronoun. When we talk about the complete subject, there are 2 different designations here. One's the simple subject, which would be just the noun or the pronoun, and the complete subject would be the noun and the pronoun and all the words that modify, explain, or identify it. The predicate is the same situation, except then we're talking about the verb. And verbs tell us what the action, what the who or what of that sentence is doing. So the predicate consists of a verb and all the words that modify, explain, or identify the verb. Now, if the 8 parts of speech are the bricks that hold a sentence together, phrases are the material that join them. Okay, and the one particular phrase that we're going to talk about today is the primary phrase that we use in English to do that, to accomplish that task, to join those parts of speech together. So in this sentence, the man standing on the corner is selling t-shirts. The man standing on the corner is the complete subject. Man is the simple subject, but everything related to that man, telling you that he's standing on the corner, is part of the complete subject. By the same token, the complete predicate is selling t-shirts. And again, is a verb. We don't often recognize those to be verbs as verbs, but that's what they do. Is, are, was, those are all verbs. So in this case, is selling t-shirts is what the man is doing, and that makes it the predicate. Now, there are different kinds of phrases in the English language. We're not going to talk about all of them because that's really not the point. I mean, there are adjective phrases, there are noun phrases, there are verb phrases. The primary phrase that we want to talk about is related to those 8 parts of speech because it's used so commonly that you can't escape it basically, and it does act as a part of speech when it's used. We're talking about a prepositional phrase. Now remember, one of those 8 parts of speech was a preposition, and a prepositional phrase only means that that preposition begins the phrase. So a prepositional phrase is a phrase that consists of a preposition, an object of that preposition, and any words that modify the object. So for example, we've got a sentence here that says Captain Mac sailed to the Antarctic. Now, in and of itself, Captain Mac sailed could be a complete sentence. Captain Mac is a complete subject. Sailed would be the complete predicate. All we're doing with the prepositional phrase to the Antarctic is adding information. And that's what phrases, prepositional phrases in particular, do. They modify subjects and verbs to give you more information so that we're not writing everything in just simple sentences. Captain Mac sailed would be a very, very simple basic sentence in English. And when we add the modifiers, we don't necessarily change the kind of sentence that it is. It's still a simple sentence, but we are adding information to it and making it much more readable. So in this case, to the Antarctic is the prepositional phrase. To is the preposition. Antarctic is the object of that preposition. I mean, that's where Captain Mac sailed to. And the modifies that object. The is an indefinite article. It only tells you that there's only one Antarctic, basically. Now, to the Antarctic functions as an adverb in this sentence. Remember, there is a part of speech called an adverb, and that adverb modifies the verb. So in this case, to the Antarctic is modifying the verb sailed. Sailed is the verb in that very simple sentence, Captain Mac sailed. It tells you what Captain Mac did. It is an action, and to the Antarctic simply is modifying that word, telling you where he sailed to. Now, prepositional phrases can be used as sentence openers, closers, interrupters. If you look closely at that previous sentence, Captain Mac sailed to the Antarctic, it's obviously being used as a closer. And the point of that is that prepositional phrases are everywhere. We use them all the time. And because they are so common and such a fundamental part of the language, they can be anywhere. You can use them consecutively. But they can be at the beginning of a sentence, in the middle of a sentence, at the end of a sentence. Doesn't matter. Prepositional phrases are a fundamental part of the English language. In fact, so fundamental that if you look at this screen, what you see is a list of common prepositions. About, above, across, within, without, in, for, over. Now, the other tricky part about the English language is that some of these words will be identified in other contexts as other parts of speech. In fact, the words but and for example, those are also known as coordinating conjunctions, and we'll talk about those later. But a coordinating conjunction can also be a preposition. A subordinating conjunction can also be a preposition, and that's what makes the English language so confusing to a second language learner. We tell you that there are rules, and then we break all the rules. So what I would like you to do as an assignment today is this. You've looked at the video, seen the PowerPoint, and what you see here is a paragraph from a book by a guy named Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton was an explorer back in the early part of the 20th century who went to the North Pole. In the quote that you see here, it's from his book South. He's talking about that experience. Well, rather, not he, but Captain Mac is somebody who he's telling the story of. But what I need you to do then is to read that paragraph and copy and paste all 9 of the prepositional phrases that you see there into the Moodle forum discussion that is also under the topic 8, Grammar 1. All of these grammar lessons will be connected to each other with a title. In this case, Grammar 1 is all about prepositions and prepositional phrases. So you're going to copy and paste all 9 of these prepositional phrases in this paragraph to that Moodle forum discussion. No one else will see your answers to that Moodle forum discussion, but it does give me an idea of how much you understand about prepositions and whether or not you can continue to identify them as we get further and further into these grammar lessons and continue to talk about grammar. All right, so that's prepositions. Thanks. Have a good day.